Competition Authority of Kenya is a duly recognized institution that deals with matters of competition in the country. Okay. Recently, there was an issue of bread and bread manufacturers and investigations being launched by the Competition Authority because of bread manufacturers, because of complaints by consumers that, you know what, you're supposed to be getting 23 slices. Well, I don't know how many slices there should be in bread. We should be getting this. Amliota should know.
Yes, yes.
That's our resident expert.
Yes. on bread matters. Okay. And what wholesale and wholemeal grain on all those things.
And all those things.
Okay.
And brown coloring as opposed to actually brown bread. Yes.
So when consumers raise concerns about what they're getting, what they're buying, and whether what they're buying is what has been promised by the manufacturer, where do they go to? When issues of companies dealing with one another and fighting, over competition and accessing the market and trying to outmaneuver each other in the market, who do they go to? All those, they go into the Competition Authority. Now we have that Competition Authority law. We have very many laws in the country, but let's bring in an expert who will help us to just understand matters of competition law, Competition Authority, the importance of this organization, why it's focusing on bread. Is it just bread? Are they going into potatoes? We have seen now the strict implementation of the new potato regulations and all those matters. Njeri Wagacha is a corporate partner at CDH Kenya, which is a law firm. Njeri, good morning, and thank you for joining us in the Situation Room.
Good morning. How are you?
We're very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well.
Welcome to the room, Njeri.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, everyone.
So, CDH Kenya has some long name, which is not very English in name. What? Just say it.
Our law firm is called Cliff Decker Hoffmeyer.
Sorry,
it's a South African law firm.
Okay.
Cliff Decker Hoffmeyer.
Okay. So Cliff, one person, Decker, another person, Hoffmeyer, another person, and then and so where in this Hoffmeyer Decker do you fit in? Are you Decker or are you Hoffmeyer?
So we are a Kenyan law firm called Kieti Law LLP, but we merged with a South African law firm called Cliff Decker Hoffmeyer. They're very well known. They're an international law firm, and therefore we are CDH Kenya. So Kieti is our local Kenyan name.
I see. Okay.
Very good.
Now, as a corporate...
it's a branding issue. It's a branding issue.
That's it, eh?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about competition and issues of competition. Just for people who may have missed out on the drama. What was this drama surrounding issue of bread? Was it about color, weight, number of slices, packaging? What was it?
It's about really knowing what you're getting. And what the Competition Authority did was clarify that when you're buying bread, you need to know exactly what's in it. You need to know how many slices are in it. You need to know what its components are. And you need to just be clear on what you're getting. And so they enforced that as a result of consumer complaints, actually. And so it was a consumer-led, strategy that they implemented.
Is that within their purview? So if an organization is not selling what it should be selling, is that them? Is that Kenya Bureau of Standards?
A lot of people have asked me that. And actually what Kenya Bureau of Standards does is do an accreditation process. So they accredit you as a Kenyan business and for the products that you're saying that you're selling. The Competition Authority has a specific sector for consumer protection. And so if you have a complaint with regards to anything that you as a consumer are consuming, you're allowed to go to them and make a complaint. They will take that complaint seriously and will investigate it and then come out with their findings. And as a result of their investigation into the agricultural sector, they've come up with these new rules and fines on bread manufacturers.
So with what regularity must you find issues? So let's take this bread, since it's right there at us, and say, how often must I find? So if I decided today and I know that a loaf of bread should have 28 or odd slices, I should know it should have 28 slices. How often must I find 25 maybe even more, 30 or then 24. How often must I find this? And then
or
to
28
whom?
thin
Or
slices,
right.
28 thick slices.
Or like I find 3 thick slices in it and it's not the way it's supposed to be because, somebody's not going to get enough, right? How often must I find this for it to be an issue? And then who do I take it to? Because I don't think if I find one today, if I bring it to the body, they'll say, well, okay, maybe this is just a one-time occurrence. Yeah.
I think there's documentation that you can file every time you want to make a complaint, right? If you are that way inclined, you're entitled on the basis of one loaf of bread or one defective product to take your complaint to the competition authority. Whether they investigate it will be the sum of all parts, really. It will be whether they've had this complaint before, whether it's something that they are looking at anyway because they have their own powers of investigation, and also whether it's part and parcel of their strategic plan. At the moment, their strategic plan is enforcement in consumer welfare. It's part of their strategic plan, and so you will see more and more enforcement action in consumer welfare protection issues. Which we're entitled to as Kenyans to bring our complaints to them and for those complaints to be heard.
Okay, so how serious are the nature of these complaints? Because there was some time, if we move away from bread and other consumables now, how serious are we looking at? Because there was some time ago, there was a video that went viral of a lady who opened up a box of juice or so, and there was a foreign body in the juice, and then somebody else said, oh, well, I had that experience too, and I had that experience too. Now you're looking at something that could be dangerous if ingested. So how serious are we looking at now in terms of these complaints and then where you must take them to? And are you going as far as Kenya Bureau of Standards? Are you taking somebody who would hold a case for you? What are we looking at?
I can only speak as a lawyer, and I can't speak for the CAK, but what I can say is, having spoken to them, because we interact with them on a regular basis, they take complaints very seriously. And what they have told me is that when complaints are made, because individuals do make complaints all the time, most of them are resolved quietly. The supplier or the manufacturer agrees to compensate the individual or make amends whatever way they can, and so they never come to the public. But these big ones do. But the point is to understand that as a consumer, you have a right to bring a complaint, for that complaint to be heard and for it to be taken seriously. It's really about empowering yourself and knowing that if you're unhappy about something, and that complaint is legitimate, it should be taken seriously and action should be taken. I would want the same thing for myself, and every Kenyan should want the same thing as well.
But let me ask this question, if I may. I understand that little bit about complaining. It's something we Kenyans do very well, so that shouldn't be a problem. But what then do we have in place that ensures that manufacturers and people who actually produce these consumer goods are held to account in maintaining the standards that they claim that their goods have?
So there's the fines that can be imposed by law. So the Competition Act says that you can be fined up to 10% of your turnover. That's a serious penalty itself for breach of consumer protection legislation. There are other fines that can be imposed. There's obviously the public, embarrassment, and obviously your reputation as a manufacturer. So all of those things are considerations that manufacturers should take seriously because they can be imposed on them, and then they can face the consequences economically. So it's not something to be taken lightly.
Who holds them accountable?
The CAK.
And how do they do this?
So they start an investigation. If they find that the investigation has, legs and, it's correct, they can impose a fine on you using the Competition Act.
So essentially we are saying that until and unless someone complains, everybody just goes about their merry business of shortchanging Kenyans and doing whatever it is that they normally do. And or do we have, yes, I understand that, yes, they will investigate, but surely what is it that we demand of our manufacturers? What do we demand of this, of the business practices so that they actually adhere to what they themselves tell us? Because if your loaf of bread is 400 grams, for heaven's sake, tell us it's 400 grams. But don't claim it's 500 when we know it is 400. That's what I'm saying. Why don't they just maintain these standards?
And I agree with you. It's really an ethical issue, and it's a shame that all of these things come out only when complaints are made. But the CAK does have a mandate to do investigations on its own, so it can do an investigation on its own, and it has. Some of the investigations that the CAK have done have not been, really publicized, and so probably they've been settled between the CAK and the manufacturer or the relevant sector. It's a shame that it has to come to that, but what we're trying to do is say beware, because as these fines are imposed on more and more people or more and more companies, then it will become an issue of you have to maintain the standard and it doesn't have to be forced upon you. I agree with that.
How many industries, how many players in this particular field have actually met with these punitive actions that we say they can meet with if they don't meet the standards? How many do we have on record?
I'm not going to be able to tell you that. I wish I knew those statistics, but it's something that they publish. The CAK does publish. I'm sure it's something we can get hold of.
You see, where I'm going with this is this. If on paper we have an organization that is supposed to play the role of the watchdog, yes, that we understand. That they periodically check on these manufacturers and ensure that they meet the standards, that is also easy to understand. But that they enforce it, something that is consumed, if you talk about products, people who produce things that are consumed by a very large population in this particular country, shouldn't there be something that is a little more publicized, a little more public, so that you and I don't have to be debating was it done, was it not done, something that we actually ought to know. They ought to take the initiative of telling us that this is what, on a monthly basis, let's say, this month we find we took X industry to court because of A, B, C, D. They fell short of X, Y, Z. Let me tell you why I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking of countries where they take these things seriously. And my mind goes back to the car manufacturing industry, and not this century, the previous century. And there's a gentleman called Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader made a name because he actually focused on the Detroit motor industry, an industry that many people didn't really want to touch because it was a powerful industry. And his issue was precisely that. You claim that your vehicles have X, Y, Z. Do they? You say the paint that this vehicle has is X, Y, Z. Does it? Now, because they're able to hold, they were able to hold this industry to account. That thinking has continued to the point where, remember when there was this huge scandal involving a car manufacturer, Volkswagen, to be specific, and it hit the news because there was one particular model of car, diesel powered, that they claimed that was clean, that it didn't emit the sort of lethal fumes into there, and lo and behold, it did nothing of that sort. Now, it was a huge issue. Again, it's a consumer issue as far as I'm concerned. Now, here we sit. We have a competition authority. We have people who we say perform these functions. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't come across very much literature beyond the complaints and beyond the fact that they exist, where you know that the consumer, in the broad sense of the word, is actually protected from the manufacturer or from the suppliers of the consumer goods that we have at our disposal.
Actually, I think I'll find myself in a position of defending the CAK, and I'm actually a practitioner, and I find myself against them, or working to defeat their objects most of the time, because their object is to say this is a competition issue. Let's investigate this sector. My object as a lawyer is to say there is no competition issue. Let this issue pass, right? But the CAK is actually quite good at, first of all, publishing its statistics, publishing its findings, and they have an annual report that they bring out every year telling us exactly what they've done. So, for example, in this and this merger, this condition was imposed. The reason the condition was imposed is because they wanted to protect the public or the employees or certain things. In this sector, we took this action, we investigated this, and this was the result. So they do come out with an annual report, and their website is actually quite comprehensive, and the information that they give us is actually quite comprehensive for us to understand exactly what's going on. I think some of these things are publicized and then become a big issue when they've been under investigation for a while and the CAK has been doing their work in the background. So in terms of a public body, I would say that as a lawyer interacting with the CAK is one of the easiest regulators to work with and one of the most transparent. So I wouldn't really be there bashing them automatically. They try and do a good job. I think even in Europe and other countries, the difference between the enforcement action, the publicization of that action is actually the compensation that is then given to individuals. So for example, in the Volkswagen case, individuals were compensated because of that misinformation that Volkswagen gave. And the onus was on Volkswagen to compensate those individuals. So what we have to do now is go further and say, although the company may be fined, you've done this, and the CAK has investigated and found this action, why aren't we compensating individuals and saying you deserve this compensation because for years you were deceived by the manufacturer? So that's probably where we need to go. But in terms of information and being open and transparent, I think the CAK does try, and you'll find that they're much better than other regulators in this country.
Njeri, forgive me, but I want to take you back. I just want to understand the thinking behind the policy and lawmakers in putting consumer protection under the competition authority. If you look at the competition authority, so yes, it deals with the mergers and acquisitions, anti-competitive practices. And a lot of the information that we get from the competition authority is on mergers and acquisitions. So there is two companies that are coming together. Recently, there was the issue of Telkom Kenya and Airtel. There are many others, and I'm actually even looking at their website. The decision on the proposed acquisition of the entire share capital of Dudutech. Another one, 84.89% acquisition of Century Microfinance. Eka Africa by Zepri. But I don't see issues on consumer protection. Why was it put here and not, for example, on the Kenya Bureau of Standards that we see and we've heard for many times is the one that's out there, that's doing spot checks, that's doing enforcement of standards. And when it comes to enforcement of standards, that's when it's also dealing with the consumers. And for example, KEBS has recently been doing a campaign where they're saying if you go and to purchase something and you don't think it meets the standards, you can get in touch with us. So we have a multiplicity of agents that are given the role of consumer protection. Why was this?
I think it's different things for different, what's it called, different folks, different strokes for different folks. But basically, Kenya Bureau of Standards can do a different job than the Competition Authority can, right? So a consumer protection issue is also an economic issue. So if you look at the bread manufacturers, for example, the issue is one of economics, because you can deceive a consumer in many ways and then have a monopoly or an oversupply or just a lack of transparency in that industry to the detriment of the consumer. Whereas what the Kenya Bureau of Standards does is look at accreditation of a particular industry and maintaining the brand or whatever the consumer, the manufacturer said that they're doing. So CAK and competition are economic issues. They deal with economics and how those affect consumers. It could have been another issue in the manufacturing industry. It's just that this one looks at also the standards that the bread manufacturers are setting, in line with KEBS, for example. But it could have been anything, which the Competition Authority look at.
Where further my confusion is compounded, there was an issue of Kenya Bureau of Standards dealing with maize flour processors and producers, right? And pulling them off the market because of what it contained. And then there's now this issue of bread going to the Competition Authority. So when I have a complaint, who do I go to and for what reason? I mean, that's why I'm wondering, why lump consumer protection under so many other agencies where I don't even know? If I go and I'm buying a cologne and I do not think that this cologne is genuine, who do I go to? Do I go to the Anti-Counterfeit Authority? Do I go to the Kenya Bureau of Standards, the consumer? Why are you putting a consumer in so many places to go?
I agree with you. You can go to many, various regulators to get your satisfactory results. I understand what you're saying. I think maybe it could be clearer who deals with what in that respect. The Competition Authority is open to, I feel like I'm defending them so much.
No, it's all right. We understand. You deal with them more than you deal with
You're
the
not
others. But
defending. You're actually explaining it, and explaining is good.
They're more in the forefront, I think, and more responsive. You know, I've never dealt with other agencies. I've never dealt with anti-counterfeit agency, for example. But it could be clearer. I take your point.
So now, from the work that you've done, and just looking at manufacturers and producers then of different products that are either consumed or used in services, do you feel that these consumers or manufacturers understand that there's a body who is watching over to make sure that they're actually producing quality content across board? Or do they feel that, you know, they can basically get away with whatever so long as they're making a profit?
I mean, I'm not entirely certain. I know that, you know, the powers of the CAK are so wide, and unless you have done some research and understood it, you may find yourself, you know, shortchanged, right? And so it's important for you to understand your business if you're a manufacturer and understand the possible consequences. I'm sorry, I hope you were hearing me right there.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. And understand the possible consequences to your business. It's up to you really to do that research. If you want to take the chance, you know, good luck to you. The CAK has the power, for example, to do a dawn raid on a business. That means they just go in there with the investigators and take whatever documents they want. Yeah. So they have wide powers to carry out investigations without even your knowledge or consent. Yeah. Those are extreme examples, but as a manufacturer, if it was me, I would be making sure that I understand what the possible parameters and consequences are.
We're having a conversation with Njeri Wagacha. She is a lawyer. She's a corporate partner at CDH Kenya, helping us to understand the competition law in the country and consumer protection, and you as a consumer, what you can do when you find things that are not working. And, well, you as a manufacturer as well, because you have people who are also in the business. What do you do when these guys come knocking at your doors? How do you deal with them?
Yeah. I mean, yes, they do take, the CAK does do its own investigations on its own volition. So there is that opportunity for, you know, manufacturers who are doing the wrong thing to be exposed. So yes. But I think like with any other country, it's difficult enough to find out and get the information. It's difficult to do those investigations. It's not an easy job. So I think we just need to, you know, be fair and say that consumers are free to make their complaints. The CAK will do an investigation, as well as you know, the CAK's own mandate to do its own investigations and find out what's happening in the consumer protection space. So yeah, let's just wait and see. I know it's a bit annoying to really give them that break, but in a lot lot of ways, we're doing better than other countries in Africa.
Sure,
so
it's also well, Njeri. I mean, to use that speed of the analysis,
we are doing better than most countries.
We're
in
doing
Africa.
better.
Okay, and that's a yardstick, isn't it?
Does that sound unreasonable?
It does.
Absolutely.
Why?
You see, if you want to look at how well you are doing, let's take, for instance, let's look at a race, something that Kenyans are very good at, the steeplechase, okay? If I happen to be at the qualifying competition at Kasarani and I am last, so I don't qualify for the Tokyo Olympics, but I tell everybody, you know, I'm one of the fastest on the continent. Now, how exactly does
you even say I did better? Some people didn't even qualify for the trials.
In fact, I did better than most of the people who run in this race in Europe.
Is any of those not true?
Oh.
It's true, I would. But at the same time, you know, just looking at how competition has developed, you know, the Act has been in place since 2010. Before that, it was the Monopolies Commission. So we're coming into our own. It's, you know, 10 years in the making. We're still doing well. We're not at the stage where we should be in terms of international best practice, but we're trying to get there. And like I said, again, I feel like I'm defending the CAK so much when really I should be enhancing the standards and pushing for an enhancement of the standards to an international level. But I do think we have to give them credit where credit is due. And also put the blame where on the manufacturers. I mean, they're the ones who are making the product. If there was no issue, there wouldn't be any reason to investigate.
Njeri,
so
you know why
let's look at all the players.
Yeah. Why I think this is brilliant is because in my mind, I see it as something that would force local manufacturers to always pursue quality regardless. So you know that there's somebody watching over your shoulder. At the same time, you know that you want to insist on best practices in terms of quality standards, because you would be surprised at the conversations we've had with people who think maybe this entitled middle class that City speaks about all the time, who will say, well, you know, I'm going to buy a foreign product because I am sure of the standard of quality. I am sure that I'm not going to open up my can of juice and find a rag, for example. You see? So
that also happens in Europe.
Yes, it does. But can you imagine but now what I'm going at is imagine the concept, the mental concept is that whatever is produced locally is not meeting the quality, is not meeting the standard of quality. But if we know that there's somebody who is checking and watching to make sure that it is, perhaps also it will then change mindsets of the quality then that is offered on a local level.
And I think that's exactly what this is. By giving the warning and putting the fines on those manufacturers, it's telling them that, listen, we are watching. And also there's a job to be done in empowering consumers. We can all do that. And I always tell everyone that I meet, if you have a complaint, take it to the right or the respective body, so that you as a consumer feel empowered to say, I'm not happy about this, and please investigate it for me and take the action that is necessary. So if consumers feel as if they have the power to make a change, then that change can be implemented.
You know, if you look at the report that, say the latest report that we have online regarding the activities of the CAK, it's absolutely commendable. There's only one little thing that, well, should you say niggles at the back of my mind when I look at it.
Yeah, you've got her giggling. CC.
No, she's being prophetic in her thinking. She is like, I'm imagining she's thinking, okay, I know what he's going to say next. Yeah. Well, you actually don't. So let me say, if more people knew about what CAK actually does, there's a section where they talk about sensitization to organizations, sensitization to the public. I want to focus on sensitization and information to the public. The organization would be far more potent, far more useful if infinitely more people knew about it and understood what it does. That is really what I was going to say.
I agree with that. I think there's a lot more work that can be done. I will take that feedback back to the CAK. And they do a lot of work. I think sometimes it's unseen, but I agree. There's
it's
a lot
not
more
enough.
Work
That's
to
what I'm saying.
publicize the work. Yeah.
How about this,
Njeri?
I just want to approach it from a different angle. I mean, we have an employment authority. We have other authority. Why don't we have a specific body that deals with consumer and consumer concerns, and not dealing with, mergers and acquisitions, dealing with, this and the other corporate, specific to consumer and consumer needs, that you resource. You have offices around the country that, I work here, and this is a consumer protection authority or consumer protection agency at county level, at sub-county level. Because as it is right now, this body has very many things that it's doing, and I can bet that among the least resourced in this competition authority is the consumer protection bit. In terms of how much time do they spend on consumer protection? How many offices, for example, do we have of competition authority around the country? So consumers are far-flung. They're in every corner of this country.
Every.
Yeah, I agree. And public resources are public resources. I'm a private lawyer. I cannot comment on government policy. So I agree. All of these things are things that as a public, we should be lobbying for. We have a role to play as well in what we want to see achieved in this country. And we can't just wait for someone to dictate it to us.
Eric, don't you get the impression Njeri is agreeing with us too quickly?
Yeah, it's a way of dodging.
I mean, Eric, I agree. She even agreed with me before I'd even said what I was going to say.
Njeri, from your expertise as a lawyer, right? Somebody who's actually now dealt with this particular field of consumer and consumer protection, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the way matters of consumers are being dealt with, it's always coming from the point of, you see, the manufacturer or the one who's supplying is already as at an advantaged position because they have the money, they can hire the lawyers. But the consumer, who is an individual consumer, going to complain about what they have received, what they bought, what they thought is what has been promised by the supplier, is not what they're receiving, does not have all this at their disposal. What is the best way to ensure that a consumer is as empowered to deal with the manufacturer when it comes to conflict resolution?
Yeah, it's again about the resources available, the knowledge that is available, and the consumer being empowered to know what they're allowed to do and how to do it. So breaking down the bureaucracy and the barriers towards making your complaint or taking your complaint and knowing who to complain to. So all of these things, I agree with you, and I'm sorry that I can't be more controversial. I agree with you that it's about empowering people and having more resources available to let the public know. But I can give you examples for myself about merger and acquisitions transactions that I've done. Where, for example, employees are concerned that union has gotten involved and blocked the actual merger from happening simply because their interests were not protected, and the CAK has taken their position. And that's big businesses which are merging, and the transaction, you can imagine, is millions of dollars, and then the union or the employees come and say, we don't want this transaction to go through. Of course, from our perspective as lawyers, we're like, this is not a competition issue. The employees will be protected. The employees are saying no, we won't have a future employment, and the competition authority is actually looking into it and has delayed transactions significantly in order to protect their interests. So I've seen that from the CAK myself and battled against my colleagues at the CAK with regard to that issue. So when issues are presented, they can be dealt with. It's unfortunate that we don't have the resources to be able, and like you said, to have a county-wide or country-wide initiatives that really mean that consumers know, I can just go to this consumer protection office and get my issue resolved. And obviously, there's the other issues of, resources. How do we sift between a genuine complaint and one that is just litigious? How do you sift between one that is an industry practice and one that is just an individual's with one manufacturer? It's a difficult job. It's not easy, as with anything. But I think let's give credit where credit is due and acknowledge that at least some action is being taken, and we can only improve in the next 10 years,
Actually, as far as the CAK is concerned, it's not some. There's a lot that they're doing that is positive.
Oh, I'm glad you're saying that. So now I'm not the only one.
You agree. You are agreeing.
I actually know that there's a lot that they're doing that is positive. All we're trying to say is that, when you have the sort of breadth and width of power that this particular institution has, the one thing that perhaps ought to be done, and I'm repeating myself here, is as many people as you possibly can ought to know what it is that you do and how it is you relate to them. Now, if that doesn't happen, then it doesn't matter how much power you have. It doesn't matter how much good you do. Nobody will actually know about it. And as far as they're concerned, they'll be asking questions. So what do these people do really? And I think the
next time you can call the CAK to the Situation Room, not just me.
Okay.
That's actually not a bad idea.
That is precisely what we will do.
Yeah.
Njeri, let me ask you, what's the best practice in other parts of the world? How are consumer issues addressed and how are they protected? How are consumers protected in other parts of the world? Is it institutions such as this one, or is it separate institutions? Is it laws? Is it how does it happen?
Yeah, I can give you an example of the UK, where there's specifically a consumer protection body to deal with consumer protection issues. There's also local citizens advice bureaus that you can go to and make your complaint there, and they take up your claim. A lot more free clinics led by lawyers, and I think that's something else we should be doing, where you can get some pro bono advice and get your complaint dealt with there. So I think it's just the avenues by which consumers can make their complaints are wider, and then also the options for getting that complaint resolved. So and then the specific consequences, making sure that whatever sector it is, they know that the consequence can be very serious for them, and then in that way protecting consumers. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Njeri. Njeri Wagacha is a lawyer. She's a corporate partner at CDH Kenya. Tell us again, CDH.
Cliff Decker Hoffmeyer.
I like your accent. Say it again.
You guys have been so tough on me, but thank you so much.
Oh, no.
I thought I was coming for a polite chat. But
It was a very
This
polite
was a very
chat.
polite
But this
chat.
was a really, really very, very polite chat. I thought this was the sort
It
of
was
chat
delightful.
that you have among friends, surely.
You said I was agreeing with everything. I feel like I'm just anyway.
Don't worry.
It's a good one. Thank you very much, Njeri. Your friends here in the Situation Room appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. It was fun.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.